Listen Lanarkshire is a community radio station governed by the registered charity Getting Better Together Limited. Therefore, the radio station itself retains political neutrality, and any political views or comments aired as part of political discussion programming or otherwise are not the views of Listen Lanarkshire, nor of Getting Better Together Limited. The station has a set of key commitments found on the Ofcom website, and we adhere to all necessary Ofcom rules. For more information or inquiries, please contact us at radio@shotshealthyliving.com.
This program is a political discussion and commentary show. It contains robust political discussion and strong opinions. Politicians with a sensitive disposition should turn off now. The views expressed by contributors are their own and are given in a personal capacity as residents and individuals. They do not represent the views of any council, Listen Lanarkshire, or any associated organization. No council resources are used in the production of this program. Contributors who hold elected office are not speaking on behalf of their authority and are participating in a personal political capacity. This is a great show, beautiful show, big beautiful show, so big and so beautiful. These guys are great, not as great as me. Who will they offend this week?
To What's the Point, North Lanarkshire's #1 political satirical podcast aimed at educating you, the good folk of Lanarkshire, in all things politics. As always, I am joined by my compatriot in procedural crime, Mr. Jerry Brennan, the Bellsy Hill bowler himself. Jerry, how are you?
Very well, Greg, and as always, it's an extraordinary pleasure to be in your company.
Jerry, that catchphrase never grows old. Well, Jerry, tonight we have a man who needs no introduction, but he's getting one anyway. It is Reform's MSP, Mr. Graham Simpson. Now, Graham's had quite a political journey, Conservative MSP, transport spokesperson, and now part of Reform UK. Basically, the political equivalent of switching football teams halfway through the season and insisting it was always the plan. With Reform growing at Holyrood, we'll be asking what exactly they want to reform, where a local government should be nervous ahead of the 2027 elections, and if Scotland is about to enter into its nothing can possibly get any weirder phase of politics. And to be fair to Graham, after years at Holyrood, joining a party called Reform probably does suggest he's seen enough. Graham Simpson, welcome to What's the Point? How are you, fella?
Well, I'm very well. I'm looking forward to our chat. I've been on the radio show a couple of times, not this format, but on the Louise Murphy show.
Oh, that's your competition, Graham. That's we're above that.
I tell you what, Louise allows me to play requests, so I get to. I don't suppose you guys are going to allow that, but so I get
you need to show up in person for that, Graham. Show up in person. We might even give you 2 songs to choose from.
So, well, anyway, without any further ado, let's get cracking, because I know we've only got you for a short period, Graham. So, like we always do with every guest, let's start with who's Graham Simpson. Where did you grow up? How did you get involved in politics? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I suppose the very beginning was when I was born, and that was in Aberdeen. So that always surprises folk, given I've got an English accent. But the English accent comes from living in England for quite a bit of my childhood. I went to school in Carlisle, and that's actually where I got interested in politics when I was at high school. So it was at the sort of tail end of the Jim Callaghan government.
Right.
And I was 15 at the time, and just sort of it got me hooked. And I joined the Young Conservatives at the time. And then we had the 1979 election where Mrs. Thatcher got elected, and I was involved in that campaign in Carlisle.
Yeah.
Conservatives didn't win in Carlisle then, but they subsequently did later on. I think it's gone back to Labour since, but it was Conservative for a while. But so that's how I got involved very early, and then left school. I never went to university. I left school because I knew what I wanted to do, which was to be a journalist. And I just thought I didn't need to go to university to do that, and I didn't. So I managed to get work as a local newspaper reporter at quite an early age, over 18, 19.
Wow.
There's quite a there is quite a legacy of that happening within the Conservative Party. I know it happens in other parties too, but the current leader of the Conservative Party is, journalist. You're a journalist. What was the name of the previous leader? She was a journalist at BBC for many years. Ruth.
Ruth. Ruth Davidson. Yeah.
So it seems to be that trajectory or that pathway through journalism can lead you on to careers in politics and what have you.
Yeah.
So how did you end up coming up north then from Carlisle? Was it just simply the job presented itself and up you came?
Yeah, well, when I left school, I moved south and got my first job in Northamptonshire.
Right.
And then I was just on the career ladder, so I had quite a number of moves early on to different newspapers. But eventually came up. I got shifts on the Sun. They had a Manchester office, a North of England edition, which closed. So I was basically told one day, don't come in. I was doing casual shifts there. So I got straight on the phone I knew they had a Scottish edition, so I just phoned them up and they said, just come up, and that was it.
Wow.
So that's what got me up here. I was really pleased to come up because of, being Scottish by birth, I'd always had a hankering to come back, and my dad was a Glaswegian, so to come and live and work in this area was great. I've just kind of never looked back.
To those who don't know your background, are you ever accused of being an English Tory parachutist?
Except I'm not English. I sound English.
I know. Just in terms of what's happened, then, like you were a really prominent member of the Conservative group. How did you manage to become so elevated within the Conservative Party, and how long did that take you?
It takes a while. I was like you guys. I was a councillor in South Lanarkshire. I did that for 10 years, and I juggled that with being a journalist. So I was, I really put the hours in, because my shifts on the newspaper were at night, and I would attend council meetings during the day before I went into work. So I did that for 10 years, and then got elected here to the Scottish Parliament 10 years ago. Gave up the journalism. I suppose it's a big risk. You're giving up a career to, fairly stable career, to come into something which is, there's no guarantees. You'll have a job in 5 years' time. So, but I've been lucky. So just working away. I've had some good roles. Housing, local government. Feel really strongly about local government and how it's been treated. Having been a councillor, and you guys all know that you have to make tough decisions every year.
That's why we wanted you on.
Right. Yeah. So I feel for you, because when I was a councillor, it seemed that every single year we were having to make cuts, and it's still going on.
See, with the cuts in mind, Graham, obviously the purse strings get tighter and tighter every year, and the issue that we see is anybody that's newly elected to council, I don't know what your experience is, but Jerry and I's experience, I was elected in 2017, Jerry was in 2022, and our experience has been, as soon as you come in to perform any critical scrutiny role within a council, you're warned immediately of the Ethical Standards Commissioner or the Standards Commission for Scotland. The Code of Conduct is threatened upon you continuously.
Yeah.
Now, bearing in mind we're heading towards a council election in 2027, Reform will obviously look to have a strategy going towards that 2027 campaign. Do you see there could be potential risks or challenges in that process, especially given the way Reform has been welcomed in Scotland by the main political elite parties? Do you think that the challenges are going to be there for local government, especially if the code, as many have cited, that the code is weaponised?
Well, you're right, it can be. And people can be subject to some quite spurious complaints. I don't know if you have been. I had a couple of complaints.
We've had a few. We've had a few. I think we all want that badge of honour. Quite.
Yeah, well, I actually do consider it a bit of a badge of honour, because if it shows you're doing your job.
Yeah.
If you're upsetting people, but it's a misuse of the system, really. And I mean, one of the things that councillors can fall foul of, and I think it's a ridiculous rule, is that you aren't allowed to comment on planning applications.
Yeah.
If you're going to take part in a vote, well, surely you're elected to have a view on things.
Yeah.
I just think that's absurd. I do remember being at a meeting when I was in the Conservatives, and it was just before David Cameron got elected as Prime Minister. And he said one of the first things he would do would be to scrap the Code of Conduct, and that's what he did for councillors in England.
Yeah.
I just think the restrictions on you are absurd.
I take it you would have been familiar with the Conservative manifesto pledge at the Scottish Parliament elections, and within that they were obviously proposing for a review of the Code of Conduct on elected members. Now, the challenge that we see, in particular at a local government level right now, as I say, budgets are stretched. We are entered into a strange universe where we are rewarding senior management of local authorities with staggering amounts of money to perform their role. £240,000 it was reported in the press one chief executive was getting, and really in effect there is no, what would you say, pay performance in regards to that.
Performance related.
It's just basically you're getting this eye-watering amount of money while services are being depleted, and year on year councils are cutting back, but yet we're paying senior management significant salary. Again, from a reform perspective, what areas are you looking to reform when it comes to local government, or is it a case that you're focused solely on Scottish Parliament reform first and then move on to local government?
I think to be fair, we've been looking at the Scottish Parliament more than local government, but we're going to have to turn our attention to that, because obviously we've got council elections next year. I think the point you raise about salaries of top executives in councils is quite right, because they are eye-watering amounts. So I think it's perfectly acceptable, I would have thought, for say the chief executive or chief officers of any council, not just North Lanarkshire, but any council, ought to be subject to some kind of scrutiny. And actually, if either of you or any councillors thought, well, I don't think the chief executive is earning his corn here, I think you should be able to say that. And if you think that somebody's not doing their job properly or they've made a mistake, you ought to be able to say that, but you can't, because you'll get reported for it.
the perverse position that elected members find themselves in now, that comment, although it's not directed at North Lanarkshire's chief executive, I at this point, I'm talking in the round. Yeah, and now's a good time for a disclaimer. This is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I'm here as a member of the public, speaking my truth. Engage the code, please.
As I say again, talking about in the broader terms in relation to chief executives, we find ourselves in a perverse position where a chief executive can turn around and make the allegation that that's a campaign against them by talking about that salary. But when it isn't, it's a case that we were elected as politicians to perform that scrutiny role, and it just looks as if it's missing at every level of government at the moment.
Yeah. I should say I've got the utmost respect for Des Murray in North Lanarkshire.
As do I.
I actually do. Although he is paid an obscene amount, but I think he's one of the more forward-looking chief execs that I've come across.
Graham,
and he really cares deeply about the area.
Is there too many local authorities? Is 32 local authorities with 32 executive teams? Is it a cost that we need not bear, and should we be looking to rationalise where we can? Say, for example, to go from 32 to 16.
32 to 16.
Yeah.
Given the significant cost year on year, and we're depleting the services year on year, is it time for a reform of the Local Government Act?
You end up going back to maybe the position we were in previously, where we had regional councils. Look, you guys know, you know local politics, and it's certainly in Lanarkshire and Glasgow. The moment you start meddling with boundaries and people's empires, really, then you're going to come up against a lot of opposition. So, in theory, Jerry, what you're saying has some merit, but it would end up as a fight, I think, and I'm not sure that any government would really want to bring that on.
Right. Do you personally feel vindicated, Graham, given that you were the first of the Conservative MSPs to move to Reform UK, a really risky personal strategy for you to undertake, but obviously something that you believed was worthwhile, and now you sit and you're surrounded by 16 colleagues. How does that feel, see your choice so comprehensively validated by the electorate?
I suppose it's been validated in the fact that I've been re-elected, but now it's what do we do with the next 5 years? And I'm always somebody who wants to achieve things, so I've got a couple of ideas which I'm not going to give you exclusives on, but
you can email them.
there are things I want to achieve. I mean, I'll just tell you one, which is not a big surprise. I had a members' bill at the end of the last session, which was to introduce a system of recall into the Scottish Parliament. Now, I think if I hadn't defected, that bill would have passed, but because I did, it didn't pass. So I'd like to reintroduce that, because it was a missed opportunity, and it leaves Scotland as an outlier in Britain. We're the only part of Britain that doesn't have a recall mechanism. Wales has now got it. The House of Commons has got it. So I will be reintroducing that, but I need to get support from other people.
Are you nervous about the lack? Look, it seems to be that there's a lack of a desire from the SNP to work collegiately with all political parties. So SNP are happy to work with Greens, the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, etc. But they have said that they won't work with Reform UK under any circumstance. So are you worried that even some really good policy ideas might simply just be ignored simply because of the source of it?
It could happen, but knowing the way the Scottish Parliament works, we've got some good committees there, and if the committees are operating properly, there's an opportunity there for individual members to work collegially. I think that'll happen. So I just think the idea that you wouldn't even talk to reform members, well, actually, it's already going on. I mean, I talk to people in the SNP all the time and ministers, but whether they would formally back a proposal is another matter. But listen, it can work in various ways. If I come up with a good idea, then the government can pinch it.
Yeah.
But so as far as I'm concerned, as long as it gets done, that's what's important. I had a good example in the last session where I pushed for companions of people with sight difficulties to get free travel on trains. So you'd think, well, that's not all that doesn't sound all that controversial. It wasn't that controversial, but I led a members' debate on that. I managed to marshal support for that, and eventually the government did it. Well, they take the credit for that. And I'm absolutely fine with that. Because the right thing got done.
Do you think
that's what matters?
Do you think Swinney's approach, but before the election, that would they deal with reform? They had their summit meeting in relation to stopping and blocking reform, and then now we find that once the Scottish Parliament elections and you're returned as sort of joint second main opposition for the Scottish Parliament, that now you find the sort of decibel level being turned up a bit, that they'll not deal with reform, they'll not talk to reform. Do you think that that's counterproductive, or do you think that at some point they're going to have to give in? Because again, effectively, you are the main opposition there in Holyrood along with Labour.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, so we're tied with Labour.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just don't think that position can hold realistically for the next 5 years. It just can't. At some point.
How do you work that? I mean, how do you take like a First Minister's question?
This is a geeky constitutional question we have, because we are fascinated.
But yeah,
how does that work for FMQs?
Will it be rotated? So
yes, it's going to be rotated.
Wow.
Between us and Labour as to who asks the first question.
Wow.
Right. And that's important. I mean, it's if you have secured second place, albeit you're sharing it, you are absolutely entitled to have that first question, because that can be it can set the tone for the entire afternoon, and it can be a killer's question. We've seen that on many occasions.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, First Minister's questions, I think it's going to become a bit livelier, actually.
Thank goodness, because it's required.
I agree, because it was getting pretty dull. The new presiding officer, Kenny Gibson, he's already made some changes, so we're going to have 2 sessions a week. The first one on a Tuesday is just for people like me, ordinary MSPs, backbenchers. So we'll get to ask John Swinney questions, and crucially, he won't have seen the questions.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And then on Thursday, it's just for party leaders.
Yeah.
And again, he won't have seen the questions. So
I think that's a big thing that people miss, because when people tune into First Minister questions, they see the news and obviously the pantomime of the chambers taking place. I think a lot of them don't quite understand the fact that the questions have already been seen, responses have been written, and the theatrics, etc., can then all be sort of getting by the whips. And I think a lot of people, and the bit for me in it is where does the political debate, where does it lie if it's all pre-staged?
Yeah, exactly. So you won't have that now. I mean, he'll obviously have questions from SNP backbenchers, and he will have seen those. Yeah. So he'll have his answers ready for those.
Yeah.
Which will probably be along the lines of, does the First Minister agree with me that X, Y, and Z in Westminster is awful, and if only we had independence, everything would be better.
Aye.
To which he says, yes, the member's absolutely right. So you'll have a bit of that.
So given the fact that you are a seasoned politician coming from the grassroots all the way up and then getting to local government and then moving your way up to the Scottish Parliament, given the sort of talent pool within Reform, and this isn't any sort of trickery in the question, do you have enough talent within the group to be able to take on the Scottish Government as a
great point, Greg.
As a legitimate opposition party? Or is it a case that you are going to try to build on and do the different things? Because ultimately you do have 5 years, and whether or not that popularity is still there in the next 5 years, and where do you see it going? Is the talent there?
There is talent. We've got members from some really serious backgrounds. I've been very impressed. But what they have to do is learn how the Parliament works.
Yeah.
And I think the party Reform has an opportunity now to work over the next 5 years to get that experience, which you only get by doing it.
Yeah.
So that next time round we can present ourselves legitimately as a government in waiting, because we'll have had members who've, had parliamentary experience and have learned how things work.
Yeah.
I was watching some reels on Facebook and TikTok and whatever it was, and it wasn't in Scotland. It was down south, and it looked like a council environment where Reform councillors who were coming in were, yes, they were inexperienced. Yes, they didn't understand the environment. They didn't understand standing orders. They didn't understand the scheme of delegation, and they were open about that. Now, some people could look at that and say, my God, that's a thoroughly refreshing, honest and upfront approach to take. And I'm speaking as a member of the public now, but someone who has another life where I'm an elected member. I remember the first few months just being absolutely deluged and trying to figure out exactly what was going on. Do you think that those politicians have done themselves a favour by saying, you know what, we're coming in here as green as the grass, we want to learn, we don't have all the skills and knowledge that perhaps sitting councillors do, but we're going to make a fist of this and give it the best shot that we can? Do you think that's helpful, or does it serve the sneering Remainers who are in the chamber? Because you can see many of them sneering and just thinking, my God, what kind of people have you put forward for candidacies?
Well, I think I saw the same clip, and I think it's refreshing if you're just honest and say, look, I've never been a councillor. I don't know the job.
Yeah.
I'll be honest about that. But obviously I need to learn the job. So bear with me, and I think people will respect that. I mean, your opponents can make hay with it, but if that's the truth of the matter, and it is a lot with, a lot of Reform councillors, they're new. And next year in Scotland, they'll be new.
Yeah.
I mean, we've only had one who's been elected in a by-election in Scotland, but next year there'll be a lot more.
Yeah. We had a discussion about this this morning, Greg and I, and kind of around that the videos that we had watched. Most people won't appreciate, I suppose, that council papers, when they come to the chamber, often are the genesis of that paper could be 5 years previous to that, and each
side legalese,
there's an update and filled with
legalese.
Yeah. So I think it's refreshing personally, and I think people will sit up and take notice about that, because it's easy for individuals to bury quite a lot of stuff in historical context.
Yeah.
New people come in and they look at the report and they go, my God, I don't understand what this means. I'm just going to vote with the party. If the whip says motion or amendment, I'm going to do what I'm told. And it'll take them about 3 years to get to where they need to be, but
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting.
I remember when I first got elected as a councillor, an experienced Labour councillor said to me, it'll probably take you your first term to actually learn how to do this job. And I think that was right. So by the time I got elected again, actually on a resounding vote, I came first in the ward in East Kilbride, and that was based on me being a good councillor and telling people what I was up to. But by the time I got my second term, I'd built up the relationships that you need to do with the officers and other members. Yeah. So I was far more effective in the second term than I was in the first, I think.
I think if we're being honest, if you were to interview 3-term councillors just now, I think quite a lot of them would still not understand what standing orders are or motions or amendments. I think it's a bit unfair to turn around and say to somebody that's newly elected, right, which is skill level at the moment. But
that's true. That's true.
I'm keen to continue on the vein of where kind of reform goes, Graham, because ultimately they've got, and again, I hope you don't mind me saying this, they've got people like yourself with significant press background, then get into local government. It's an arsenal to basically have in your political grouping. And if it's a case that is there, how do you see reform transitioning from what can only be described now as a sort of rebellious party and a party sort of bent on sort of division within the idea of immigration and various other things, and that might be an unfair position for me to present, but if it's a case that reform is looking to be something credible in the eyes of the Scottish electorate, then how do you see that playing out in the next 5 years?
I think for us in the Scottish Parliament, we've just got to prove to people that we're an effective opposition. We've got good ideas. I do reject the accusation that we're about division. I don't think we're not about division. We actually care about communities. In fact, I would say the opposite is the truth. Our opponents may say that, but I don't.
You articulate that, Graham. Like, just as a general rebuttal, what would your general approach be to say, it's not about division, it's about it's about reform. It's about reassessing where we're at and where we want to go. Are we going in the right direction, doing the right things? Have we done the proper checks and balances? Is that the kind of line that Reform UK are going to take? Let's challenge the perceived wisdom of the last 25 years.
It's just challenging the way things have been done. We do talk about immigration, but the people are concerned about that. So why shouldn't you talk about it? You should be able to talk about it without being branded racist, because it's a legitimate thing to discuss, and people are worried about the numbers. So I just don't accept at all that talking about an issue like that, but could be anything, makes you divisive. What you're saying is, well, actually, I don't think things are working as well as they should. Let's change it.
Do you think you articulate that enough, Graham? Do you think as a party you're articulating that position, or do you think that again the press have been unfair in relation to your opposition's been unfair? As I said at the beginning of this, John Swinney obviously took the stance of a summit against the right, and you were obviously classified as the party that's leading on that. How does that articulation come across? Do you think you're doing enough to try and put down that idea then it's no division?
Well, hundreds of thousands of people voted for us just the other week. So they obviously disagree with that assessment, and you can't brand that many Scots as extremists, because it's effectively what John Swinney was trying to do. It's just not true. They're just ordinary folk having their say at the ballot box. And perhaps the question should be turned around if your stance is, reformer extremists, which I don't think we are, then the question should be to our opponents, well, if that's your stance, then how has it come to the position that, there's several 100,000 people vote for this party? Is that a failure on your part?
It's a question. Sorry, Jerry. As a question we ask people, Graham, if I'm being honest, because ultimately, for to take a stance like that, in our opinion, in a democratic society, regardless of whether they agree with your position or they disagree with your position, communication and dialogue has to be critical to move things forward. And we have asked that to a number of political parties. Well, if it is a case that reform is there and they're elected to the Scottish Parliament and they're there in number, how are you going to work with them? Because ultimately that's what the Scottish electorates want to see. They want to see collegiate working in the Scottish Parliament.
They do. And that's the way the Parliament was set up. Yeah. It's the way it's meant to work. So to ostracise one party is, I think, being disrespectful to the electorate. We've had, if you think about it, guys, we've had, over the history of the Scottish Parliament, not recently, but at the start, there was a kaleidoscope of parties. Yeah. And some on the more extreme left. Yeah. Rather than right. And that's fine. That's fine. There were some colourful characters here. So at the start of the Parliament, you had a number of different parties. I think the recent history has become a bit safe, if you like, maybe a bit too pally. People get into the bubble and just be, quite comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you rebut the kind of... We used to do Vox Pops on this show in the early days. Greg would go around various different places and ask questions. And some of the feedback from the early ones was around reform, just when it was kind of around with the by-election time when Ross Lambie was standing, Greg, over in Hamilton. We also on the show. Yeah, and some of the chat that we were having, and some of the chat that I was having, was that depending on your political persuasion, that reform were simply Boris Johnson's cabinet in disguise, and that eventually they might get through one political cycle, but the reality is that this is a kind of hybrid of the Conservative Party operating as something else because of internal wrangling. How would you combat that kind of narrative?
Well, in Scotland, it's just not true. You do have people like me who've been in other political parties, but as well as ex-Conservatives, we've also got people who've been in the Labour Party. We've got people who used to be nationalists, have changed their minds. So we've attracted people from all over, but I think it's surely a sensible thing to have people who've got some experience in politics, like myself, like Malcolm Offord, who was a government minister in Westminster. I think that's a sensible thing to do. And the UK party is doing that. And yes, there are a number of ex-Conservatives, but they've got experience of government. So if you want to be the government, and Nigel Farage wants to form a government, then to me, it's a very sensible thing to bring in people who've got experience of that.
Finally, from me, because I know we're running out of time, Greg, but it's just to finish on this section. You're no longer a Conservative politician, and you might answer this question by saying, well, that's really up to them. But looking at that party and the way that it's been rejected both north and south of the border. What do you think lies in front for them within the next 5 to 10 years? Are they a party in terminal decline? And I know we've said that before, and they came roaring back around about 2010 when we thought potentially that Labour and the Lib Dems could close them out for a generation. Do you see them as a spent force, or is there a future for them?
I think the Conservative Party's it's a very old party. I mean, it's been around for a long time in various guises. I can't see it completely collapsing, but my sense is that certainly in Scotland, and possibly in England, but actually we saw the results, the council elections. They're almost become irrelevant in the minds of the public.
Yeah.
So I think, apart from in Scotland, those seats across the borders, which the Conservatives held, in large parts of Scotland, people just aren't thinking about them anymore. Yeah. And that was reflected in the results. I mean, we went in our part of Scotland from 3 Conservative MSPs down to 1, and now Reform have got 3.
Yeah.
So, I think they're largely irrelevant.
So within
I just don't see it. I don't see how it's difficult to come back from that.
Obviously, we use guys now being the sort of new kids in the block in the Scottish Parliament in particular. You've obviously had a significant dent on their vote and their vote share. With the fact that your manifesto pledge was to kind of look at various areas of the Scottish Government, and you were looking to try and reform certain areas. Quangos was obviously a consideration in there as well. What key quangos are you looking at? Where do you see money to be saved in relation to the budget deficit or black hole that is continually reported in Scotland?
Well, I've not named any specifics. I just know there are too many.
Yeah.
And in the last session of the Parliament, I sat on the Public Audit Committee, and there was a couple of quangos came across our desk, and we had them in, and one was the Water Industry Commission for Scotland, who just had a cavalier approach to spending our money. And we were very, very critical of them. Historic Environment Scotland was another. They've had their issues. So I think it's time for a root and branch review.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I think Ivan McKee has been tasked with doing. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with. But there are too many, and they're quite often unaccountable.
Do you see any of them as being value for money? Do you think they actually bring anything? Or are we past the stage of that now? It's kind of just there to keep the status quo, keep everybody happy. There's people who are building empires within these things, and it's basically it's there. It's not going to shift. Or is there any?
Some of them will do good work. I mean, within the figure of, I think it's 133 arm's length public bodies, that can include health boards, for example. But so there are organisations there that are doing good work, but it's more of the peripheral ones, I think. So we're not talking about health boards unless you're talking about major health reform. Nobody seems to be doing that, but there'll be lots of ways we can save money.
So that Scottish Parliament election there as well, Graham, you stood in Airdrie against the previous Health Secretary. Why change to Airdrie, the coming for East Kilbride? Why would you not stand in South Lanarkshire as the constituency MSP? Why did you see Airdrie as fertile territory?
The boundaries changed, the regional boundaries.
Right.
In a very strange way, because East Kilbride and Hamilton, which were in central Scotland, moved into south of Scotland, which I just think is a rather uncomfortable position. It doesn't feel right, but that was it. So I'd represented central Scotland for 10 years, and although I live in East Kilbride, East Kilbride's now in a region that I've not represented. So it was very simple. It was quite simple. That was the reason.
Mm-hmm. So it was nothing to do with Neil Gray standing as the health secretary and having a failing remit. No. That would have made it better.
Neil.
That would have made it better.
Neil doesn't live in Airdrie either.
No, I know. It's, he's a son of Airdrie apparently. But anyway.
Greg, I was going to just. I know we're running out of time. I'm particularly interested in housing. That's my historical background. What does reform have in mind or in store for, like social housing, right, or housing for even affordable housing? Because Greg and I did some work just around North and South Lanarkshire, looking at the average property prices. So an average property price in North Lanarkshire, where we live, for a 3-bedroom terraced house is about £135,000 on average. And council new builds, flats, many of them are coming in close to £300,000 per unit. Have we come to the end of the current procurement arrangements where we are no longer getting value for money? Because we can never really be in a position where a flat would normally run you £90,000 to buy off the shelf. You could invest 20,000, 30,000 in it, bring it up to Scottish Housing Quality Standards, and you've got a lettable property for a couple of generations perhaps. When we're shelling out so much public money to, seems like cartels. That might be wrong, that might be unfair, but that's what it feels like to me. How do we address that?
I'm not sure I understand your point.
So have we reached a point where have we got to the point where like procurement arrangements for local authorities have been hijacked by cartels who are driving prices up rather than driving prices down?
Is this for social housing?
It's for social housing. Social housing in North Lanarkshire is normally running per new unit to build between £260,000 and £300,000 per unit.
Just to build on
land that we own. There's no land procurement.
Wow.
We've also had the position in North Lanarkshire, a £1.8 billion contract for housing repairs. And again, the biggest public sector contract ever awarded in Scottish public sector history. A £1.8 billion contract that went to a sole bidder, no broke up into lots and no following various other things. So questions are now starting to be asked at local government, and especially within the Scottish government. Obviously, you have the overall ability to change that legislation. Is it time that we looked at reforming legislation when it came to procurement models? Because value for money at a local level just doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Okay. I'll be honest, I don't know. That's the first time anyone's raised it with me.
If you give me 300 grand, I could go and buy three 2-bedroom properties.
Yeah.
Off on the open market.
Yeah.
3 properties for the price of one. That's.
I think Jerry, the figures you quote do sound too much.
Yeah. But this is what we're seeing in local government across the board. This isn't just restricted to Lanarkshire. This is
it's a nation.
It's a nationwide issue now, and really in effect that's why the likes of Reform and other political parties, especially who are looking to try and change the status quo, shake it up. Then there's definitely areas that need shook up, and those areas can have a positive impact tomorrow in relation to what local government can deliver. Jerry and I's position in this, and I'm sure you'll agree to a certain extent, Graham, local government is one of the most important levels of government, because for the minute you wake up in the morning and walk out in that street, that politics is all around you. Every single bit of local government politics is around about you, and those decisions being made in that chamber are effectively going to sort of influence and derive on things. But a discussion with somebody earlier today, and they were absolutely adamant, coming from a council background, to get in a UK parliamentary position, that local government is now officer led. Elected members at a local government level no longer make the decisions. It's nod throughs in relation to committee reports, etc., which are derived by officers. And again, I think that if it is a case that the Scottish Parliament especially is going to start to look at these things, whether it be Ivan McKee or whether it be yourselves or somebody, that discussion has to be at the forefront now, because if we're increasingly reducing service each year, we're looking at eye-watering figures being paid to chief executive, and this isn't any criticism to North Lanarkshire's chief executive or any other chief executive that's in and around, then those discussions will have to start happening now, because financially we're not going to be able to cope as we start to progress into the future.
Yeah, you're right. Now, look, if you've got ideas on how procurement could be changed, we're probably not going to solve that now. But if you write them down
on a postcard.
Yeah, write them down and send them to me, because I'm open to anything like that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what we want is more housing.
That's it. That's it.
And obviously it comes at a cost, but you want to get the cost down while keeping the quality up.
And there shouldn't be a barrier as well. There shouldn't be a barrier. Jerry and I, as I said, we had the same discussion today. There seems to be like a social cleansing taking place, and this is everywhere again, because as soon as the developers move in, like you said at the beginning, taking away the right for elected members to be able to comment on planning applications. One of the biggest bugbears I have is this word community benefit. What does community benefit actually mean? Developer comes in, builds all these properties. Section 75 isn't even equated to the value or index priced any longer. It's a flat fee. So what we're constantly across the board is that community benefit. What does that actually mean? This is a load of nonsense. It's like saying to a joiner, I'm a wood technician. No, you're a joiner.
I'll take it.
One of my big successes as a councillor was discovering that there was a pot of money, community benefit money, which had been given by a developer. So the money was sitting there. I don't think councillors hadn't been told about it. The officers knew about it, obviously, but I was told it existed. I then approached the officers and said, I know about this, and I've got a proposal for how we should use it. Mm-hmm. The proposal was to develop a play park. In a park. So a young guy, a school pupil, he's probably grown up now, so long ago, but he came to me wanting a skate park. And I thought, well, yeah, that could be a good use of that money. So I went knowing the money was there, I then worked with this kid and went into his school, and we actually got the kids to design the play park. And it was brilliant, and it's still there. It's still
being used. Yeah.
But that was only because I found out about this money.
But there's no standardisation of that.
But you should all know. You should all know that there's money. Yeah.
So Glasgow operates where elected members get an opportunity to decide where that money gets spent. You could look at other authorities, it differs. In North Lanarkshire, well, I've been chasing for years in relation to what's the overall value. I'm part of what's called a community growth area. There is thousands of houses being built in my ward area. And again, I've not seen as much as a final figure for how much was generated in that, nor did I understand that there's 4 themed areas that money has to be spent on: play, community, sport, and various other things. And again, these things are only well presented at a local government level, because my biggest concern is, and I think that again, it's something that I'll be working on over the next couple of months, is our money's been actually moved elsewhere in the authority, whereas the legislation clearly stipulates that if Section 75 money's coming in, it's going to remain and be retained in that ward area. So you've got disparity across the board in relation to all sort of local authorities, and I think that's obviously a critical area. But Graham, you'll be glad to hear that's us came to the end of this. I hope it wasn't as bad as what you thought, and I know that Jerry and I can kind of go on a wee rant sometimes about local government, But we are very interested to see how this develops for you guys, especially
Absolutely.
and the opportunity that's been presented to you, because
Yeah.
to break away from that status quo and conformity, which seems to have settled in lovely in the gravy train that is the Scottish Government, then I'm sure that we'll be eagerly awaiting to see what outcomes that you are able to deliver over the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
No, it's been good. It's been good to chat to you. I'm happy to do it again, even though you don't play requests.
You need to come to the studio.
You need to come to Shorts, though, Graham.
I'll come into the studio next time.
Good man. I'll buy you a coffee.
But Graham Simpson, thank you very much. And that's
Thank you, Graham.
Point.
Appreciate it.
Cheers. So welcome back to What's the Point? Well, Jerry, it has been a crazy evening because you and I had to do that recording earlier on of Graham Simpson. Before I come on to chat about Graham, I think that again we need to offer a wee apology because we're running late tonight, so we'll only be on for another 10-15 minutes. So, Graham Simpson, guest for this evening, how did you find them? Like them, loathe them?
No, I mean, I haven't loathed any of the guests that we've had on the show. What I will say about Graham is he's a very measured, meticulous speaker.
Yeah.
Certainly early on in the chat he was a wee bit wary of us because he didn't know us really, and then as things got on, I think we got quite a lot from Graham. I think there will be more shaking up at Holyrood than even Graham was happy to share.
Do you think the position for the SNP, and we're live on TikTok just now as well, so you can join us on that also, but do you think that the SNP's position just to flat out refuse their existence, do you think that's sustainable?
I genuinely don't. I don't when it's the joint second biggest group.
Yeah.
I don't think that's politically. I don't think it's terrible going forward.
Yeah.
You have to work with everyone. And
Well,
if you're going to be the elected government of a country, you're elected to serve everyone.
Yeah.
Even those that you might not like a particular party or their approach, or those who voted for them even. But you have to represent them and support them.
Yeah, you're effectively turning that into the hundreds of thousands of people that voted them and says that your opinion no longer matters.
Yeah. So
I think it's a dangerous game, especially for the main political parties in Scotland anyway, where, as I said, you like them, you love them, it's indifferent. The fact is they're there. And if it's a case that they're going to look to try and change the fundamentals of the Scottish Parliament, effectively next year look at the Scottish local government's framework as well, then I think it will be definitely an interesting wee while.
there's only what we got 2029's the next Westminster elections.
That's what they call
The big, if it goes full term.
Yeah.
Next year, local council elections are going to be seismic for reform. I think this is going to determine whether or not they kick on.
Now
Or whether they fall back.
Let's have an honest discussion, and again, for you good folk on TikTok, you're more than welcome to join into this. We will be reading the comments. So if it's a case that, let's talk about your personal experience, because I think that is really, really important. In that interview we highlighted there the code of conduct for elected members. Given the fact of the Scottish Government's approach to reform, you can quickly see that, and I'm no Mystic Meg, I'm only professing to be a fortune teller.
Much more attractive than you are.
Skeptic Greg, I think, is probably a just title, but again, looking at the cynicism that I would have in relation to reform standing candidates, they are going to be simple targets as soon as they enter into a local government space. Now, you'd highlighted the idea, recent video footage that's emerged in relation to a local government down in England, and whether or no that approach, that honesty, turning around and saying, well, do you know what, we're no part of this, we don't understand these motions, we don't understand the amendments, and again, that argument's both ways. You should have knowing about these things if you went to stand, but
You
also
should.
how do you learn them unless you're in that position?
Going to be honest though, Greg, right, and without interrupting, I was privy to a candidate running in 2022, and that individual had no concept of a ward. Like, she had no idea about the number
This
of
is for
wards.
the SNP.
No idea about the number of wards.
There's a number of them in North Lanarkshire, to be honest.
They had no concept about the number of councillors overall. No concept about motions, amendments.
Number of local
None
authorities.
None of that.
None of that. But then they get promoted the minute that they come in, because obviously the administration was won by the SNP. They just need to fill bums own
I
seats.
think
So
somebody's
promoted to a senior position
somebody's
within
seen them
that group.
coming. Somebody's seen them coming.
Aye. Well, again, coming back to the point that I'm making, local government elections next year for reform, there'll be candidates up and down the land that will be standing for them. And the bit that I think that reform has to be prepared for is the weaponisation of the code of conduct against its members.
I think so.
Because I think for the good folk at home to understand that there is an ethical standards code for Scottish parliamentarians, and there's an ethical standards code for local government, and obviously there's one for MP. MP one is kind of governed by the parliamentary standards. When you get to the Scottish Parliament, theirs is different for the code of conduct that exists for councillors. We've spoke about this previously in the show with Fiona a couple of weeks ago, and it's merely a HR process now in relation to making sure that elected members don't speak out of tone, don't really break the whip, come away from the party line, but also in addition to that, the more concerning aspect that seems to be rearing its head across the country is that senior figures within local authorities seem to be weaponising that code of conduct to stifle scrutiny.
I think it's there are individuals who would argue that it's no longer just a code of conduct, it's a code of control.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. It's not necessarily about conduct that's bad or shocking or anything like that. It's is it working against the control mechanisms that exist within local authorities, and which the Parliament in Holyrood want to see working to so that they can control who's coming up next.
Well, again, the cynic in me, Jerry, I think that, again, for any new political party that's coming in and looking to shake up, especially at a parliamentary level where the legislation can be changed, then once you start to get to the ground level, all the good folks listening to this show tonight and all those people on TikTok following us now, if you've ever had to deal with an elected member, what has that dealing been like? Now, we're not looking for anything critical in relation to that question. What we're saying is when you go to the elected member, do they turn around and say to you, I'll have to put a request in for that, and if it's so many days, and then the next thing that I can't really challenge it once it gets to that stage, because ultimately we've created as a framework to manage elected members, and that autonomy, does that exist anymore for local councillors? And if you've got a grouping of people coming forward up and down the land, this isn't just 5 councillors standing in North Lanarkshire, this is going to be seismic in relation to the scale of standing in every local authority. Then this again, it's that idea, how does the status quo manage those individuals that are coming forward that are going to be very, very opinionated?
I'll be honest, in the early days in my other life when I'm not acting as a member of the public here on a podcast.
Well, look, even that, we have to put a disclaimer every 2 seconds because we will be subjected to the councillor code of conduct, even though we're having an honest and frank discussion as citizens in North Lanarkshire.
Yeah, so I think in the early days I would often suggest to a constituent who'd maybe contacted me the process, but only to manage expectations, Greg.
Yeah.
Only to manage expectations, and often that's what you are. You're a qualified expectation manager.
Yeah, but an interesting point, and I would challenge any listener listening this evening, if you're interested in a wee bit of research, because it can be fun sometimes just to stick in a what do they know freedom of information request. I would write to your local authority and ask how many complaints have been made against elected members for management within a local authority, and do that tally. Look at it, because ultimately the alternate doesn't exist for elected members to make the same level of complaint against that. I mean, you were talking about this. The Code of Conduct, just for everybody at home, the Standards Commission for Scotland, Ethical Standards Commissioner will investigate, and then the Standards Commission for Scotland will ultimately decide on whether or not that proceeds to a hearing. I've seen cases, Jerry, and read them on the Standards Commission's website where council monitoring officers who have no dog in the fight, there isn't anything really there, are asked their opinion on a certain case.
How arbitrary is that?
Well, again, we can take a recent example with Kenny Duffy. Kenny Duffy has obviously been subject to a discussion for the SNP.
Is this the motion that we discussed last week? This was the motion that we discussed last week. Is there an update on that? There is an update, funnily enough. It seems to have been dropped, Jerry. No.
It's completely dropped now.
Stop the bus.
So that special council meeting that was scheduled for Thursday.
But Greg, that motion was
to see whether or not Kenny Duffy was a fit and proper person after that incident that happened 4 years ago, and a very light sanction was placed upon him in relation to censure. But that brings into question the very nature of North Lanarkshire Council. Brings it into disrepute. You think so? But
so
again,
they just pulled it.
But again, the interesting fact in all of this is coming back to the crux of the position here. If you've got elected members where the monitoring officer of a council will say in Kenny Duffy's instance, well, do you know what, it's not really amounting to much, it was a very small breach, it was a planning thing, the recognition's been done, he's admitted it, right, let's move on. But then you get to other cases where descriptions in that are the monitoring officer, if you allow these individuals to get away with this and that, then the behaviour will be unbearable, and that idea of the language and terminology being used, bad and shocking behaviour, and all this kind of stuff. Well, you start to look at it and go, well, hold on a second, who's the code now? What is it there to represent? What is it actually there to serve?
Greg, it's not a level playing field. I know of a circumstance where an elected member was accused of a breach.
Mm-hmm.
Not an allegation as such. It was a statement of fact that you'd breach. Nothing happened with that breach.
Well, I think it's interesting that the Tories in their manifesto pledge made the pledge that, because it's the double standards. It's the health of local democracy. I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get it to, because ultimately what you have to have is the opportunity for debate to take place. If debate is stifled because everything, we had a guest on this morning, we did a live recording of quite a significant political beast in UK politics.
Indeed.
We did that this morning, and their very words were, every council is now officer led.
Yeah.
So again, unprompted, all the rest of it, councils are officer led. If they're writing the papers, presenting everything, and you're just there to nod along, then
voting
ultimately
fodder was what he mentioned the word voting fodder.
It comes back to it. We're arguing the fact that John Swinney, First Minister questions, he's not going to be allowed to see what the questions being presented are anywhere in relation to the backbencher Tuesday session.
Yeah.
But when we get to local government, then really in effect it's a case of nod everything through still. Where is the debate? The debate no longer exists at a local government level. Now that's down to a couple of things in my opinion. One, scare factor of the Code of Conduct, because for the minute you're elected, you're then told about the Code of Conduct, the Ethical Standards Commission and the Standards Commission.
Code of control.
So again, for all those new members coming in, and this is the point, where do we return local democracy? Where do we return that?
We need to do our best to encourage local independent councillors.
Yeah.
That's the primary way to avoid all the vagaries of the whip system and all the control mechanisms of the big parties, because together the officer class, the party system, the control that goes around that's what That's what ensures
the significant wages.
That's what ensures you're going to be a good boy or girl.
But it's
in the chamber.
Like Graham Simpson said, elected members should have the right to question salaries.
Well,
they should. When did you ever hear any motion coming forward to turn around and say, do you know what? See, when the face of all these cuts that's taking place in this council, I think that officers should be taking a reduction of 10% in their salaries.
Well, COSLA sets for the chief exec, and that's.
Where is it done at COSLA, Jerry? Where is it? When have you ever seen any minute coming for COSLA? Is there any update given at full council in relation to what discussions are there at COSLA?
I don't know if there was necessarily. I might be wrong in that because I don't get to go to that many committees now.
Well, I go to zero committees.
But
now.
I'm not sure if something went to committee for that. But the point that Graham made was really interesting when he was speaking about what David Cameron did when he came into power in 2010. He did away with the code of conduct for councillors down in England.
Do you think that's what's needed up here to bring some sort of health back into local democracy?
I think we spoke about this last week and have done for many weeks. In fact, there needs to be a root and branch renewal of the entire Parliament. It's now close to 30 years since it was established. There's not been that many changes as to how it organises itself, the structures of governance, for example, the corporate body and all the rest of it. I think we need to review all of that. And the Standards Commission is in scope.
So the SNP has been mired in scandal over the last couple of months, especially we take Jordan Linden's stuff, and then recently, yesterday, we take the Peter Murrell stuff, and then obviously today as well, questions have been asked to the First Minister again and Nicola Sturgeon.
I would ask people to listen to Joanna Cherry.
Yeah.
And Joanna Cherry's
There's a lot
comments.
of similarity in relation to how the party machinery works against those who are raising any form of issue.
And those who followed the Jordan Linden case, and those involved in that will listen or watch that with interest, because some of the same names are mentioned.
Given the fact the election results again, I know we covered that a couple of weeks ago, but given the fact that, do you not think the SNP is in the most fortunate position ever? Because ultimately, who is their opposition now? Because they don't seem to have any major left-leaning opposition to challenge them in a constituency level.
There's none.
So do you think the complacency's kicked in for the SNP, thinking that, by the way, we've just won this election, thinking it's based on merit and based on the fact that again, they're delivering for Scotland, but I think the reality is there's just no left.
No. The Unionist
centre parties.
The Unionist vote fragmented, and that turbocharged the SNP's the SNP and the constituencies. That was it.
Aye.
So at the point where you have too many Unionist parties, then the SNP are going to come through. Not because they've been an exemplary government over the last, certainly since 2015, 2016. I think they were a force to be reckoned with between 2007, 2011. Not so much in recent times. And they've been very fortunate.
Between you and I, because there's nobody else listening, right? Just between you and I, what do you think Reform's chances are at a local government level next year? What do you think the benchmark is? And by the way, I don't have any dug in the fight in this. I'm not promoting Reform on Monday. I'm just really interested in the fact, for a political geeky perspective, about what we think potentially is going to be the numbers.
If I was to hazard a guess, I would be looking probably between 15 and 20%.
Do you think they'll take any administrations?
No. I think they will do really well in second and third preferences.
Right.
I think they'll do really well in second and third preferences, and that's going to propel them.
Do you agree with me, Jerry, the fact that potentially if you're looking, because it's going to be all new types of people, and no doubt, by the way, we've heard the rumour mill in North Lanarkshire for ages as well, certain individuals for the Tory party, potentially one SNP councillor in North Lanarkshire is already in discussions looking to jump, who works for a prominent MSP, but again, they could potentially all see their way into a political home for Richard Sullivan, to go back to that idea of the Tory party What do you think? Do you think these rumours could potentially hold fruit? That you start to see a number of Labour, SNP, and potentially independents all coming together to bring up about this very match.
I'm going to be honest, Greg. I think all bets are off for next year. I think there's going to be some mesmerising announcements on the way up.
Are you going, Jerry? Are you considering your reform?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my own counsel at the moment, Greg, and when the time is right, I will make the appropriate announcement.
I just find that a fascinating prospect that potentially, and again maybe this is my own naivety, but if you've literally got a brand new political party, regardless of whether you love them, you like them or whatever, it's indifferent to me. The bit that I find fascinating is that for the first time in a long time you're actually going to see a political party that's come on the scene that can upset the status quo of the political establishment at a local government level. Now, my personal opinion, no political party should exist at a local government level. It shouldn't be political parties, because this is ultimately about your wins, education, your bins, everything hyper local. That shouldn't be about what happens in the Scottish Parliament or the UK Parliament, because it has no impact on what takes place in there. Whereas if you had proper representation, local representation, then you'd be able to lobby the Scottish Parliament without fear or favour.
Right, here's my prediction, right?
Right.
My prediction is this: Reform will be no friend of the Scottish Parliament. Reform won't be in the longer term.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that they want to destroy devolution straight away, but I think if devolution was took off the table, they wouldn't be too unhappy.
They wouldn't be too unhappy at it.
That's my take on it.
Right.
So here's what I think's going to happen. I think the 15 to 20% of Scottish councillors who will be elected as reform councillors are going to be advised to make noise, right?
Make as much noise
as you can, right? And what we'll do as your elected MSPs, we will support you in the Parliament. We will make noise about the local authorities where you are. We will make noise about the Standards Commission. We will make noise about perceptions of officer-led councils, and make the point that elected members should not simply be voting fodder.
So we had the conversation with Graham Simpson about the Quangos, and for anybody listening, the Quangos are basically like arm's length organisations of the Scottish Government, right? So in that, an interesting statistic that we came across when we were speaking to Fiona Higgins was the Ethical Standards Commissioner. Now, we've got two bodies that oversee the code of conduct for elected members: the Ethical Standards Commissioner, who investigates the elected member, and then the Standards Commission for Scotland, who oversees any sanction, hearing, etc. And what they're quick to do is jump straight to publication, whatever sanction they've taken against an individual, and with that bad and shocking behaviour. In quite a lot of the cases, you're not actually seeing anybody getting sworn at or aggressiveness and that. Quite a statistical number of the cases are really semantics and wordplay. That's basically it. The Standards Commission interpretation of what was says, and no the actual person's interpretation of what was says. But let's hone down to the Ethical Standards Commissioner. And when we watched that hearing, or that annual report being presented to the Scottish Government Committee on Housing and Planning, the budget for the Ethical Standards Commissioners went from £1 million or whatever it may be to over £2 million.
A lot of money.
Because the increase in cases, as I said the last time we were on, statistically points to complaints being raised by senior management and officers in relation to elected members. And so really, in effect, if you look at how much money, and £2 million in the grander scheme of things in the budget of the Scottish Government isn't catastrophic. It's not going to end the world tomorrow, but it's still a lot of money. And that's the bit, and we've kind of looked at the position for the health, because it does need a health check. The local democracy needs a health check. If you go to elect or put your cross in the ballot paper for somebody who you want to represent you, regardless Whether you know them, you don't know them, you're voting for the party, it doesn't matter, that's your choice. It's the same as the Scottish Parliament election. You've elected a Reform MSP, you put them down on your list vote, and that's who you've decided that you want the party to represent you. When it comes to local government, if you do the same and you want somebody for Reform to represent you, or an independent or a Labour member or an SNP member or a Tory, if there's any Tories left at that point, you're basically telling whatever that authority is that you're looking for that individual to represent you. If that individual is then represented to have their wings clipped for performing any real scrutiny in relation to how an organisation like a council has been operated, if they're having their wings clipped and complaints made in relation to bog standard stuff that should be bread and butter for a councillor, the imbalance now is quite staggering. Why would you do it? Why would you get involved in local government?
It's a good question, and I don't know that it on its face whether or not it looks an enticing role to play, and yet it is an incredibly important role to play.
It's a rewarding and an important role, but again, are you effectively able to do the work? That's the
I think there's an opportunity. I think there's going to be an opportunity for the next few years to see where Reform go with us and just how loud they want to be. They'll either come in and they'll be agitators, they will be disruptors, or they're going to settle in.
Well, I think interesting, just on a final note before we finish up for this evening, a very, very interesting part happened at the very end of that interview there, Jerry. I call it an interview, it's a chat. But when we go to the end there where he was talking about public sector procurement, and we made the point that is procurement actually delivering what it's meant to be doing now? Best value? Is it value for money in local authorities? Or is it a case that we need to review and reform that entire process? And I use reform not in the sense of a political sense. I'm talking about actual reform. Do we need to look at that system because it's no longer delivering value for money?
I think I would fully expect Mr. Graham Simpson, MSP, to be going away and doing some work on that, to look at the costs of, in particular, the procurement of social and affordable housing.
Well, Jerry, that's us came to the end. For the good folks that have joined us on TikTok, apologies, we've only been on for a short period tonight, and for you good folk listening, thank you very much for your patience. Next week, Jerry, we have a stonkery, I guess, as I said earlier, a political beast in this country who is actually starting to make a big name for himself, and we'll probably reveal that later on in the week, Jerry. Indeed. But let's just say that is an interview that you do not want to miss.
You don't want to miss it.
You do not want to miss. But anyway, we'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Take care.
Sir.